So when you look at what happened to the oil markets, right? We've been talking like for the past decade. There's chatter. What if Iran retaliates to something like what we just saw in the last week by shutting down the Strait of Hormuz, which would send oil prices skyrocketing, markets panic, skyrocketing oil cripples the global economy, et cetera, et cetera. Iran didn't take those specific actions in the Strait of Hormuz because, they imply, um, I talked about things can, take like this last chapter of this specific book, maybe that's being written on the Iran nuclear threat kind of topic. That can still go a few ways here, but I think we just saw the climax. Now with the resolution is, the final episode of the season, usually pretty boring, right? Um, if they did want to send oil higher, they could probably do it temporarily, but there's a huge cost. It'll be like it'll basically result in their annihilation from a military perspective. The regime's out, no chance for reform. So it seems right now that's not the approach they're going to take. We'll know probably in the next days and week over the coming days and weeks how that story develops. But on the first kind of reaction to Israel takes this, massive coordinated military attack on Iran. Um, Most people probably would have told you the expectation, what happens to WTI oil prices. If you ask people on the street, just describe last week's development, it probably wouldn't be uncommon to hear people say $120 oil, 150, 200, 250, right? Well, what's reality here? It's 75. So this squeeze, the geopolitical risk, squeeze on Iran. The spike has only been so far. This could continue, and oil might. Uh, this is not inconsistent with saying oil and other commodities should trend higher in the medium term. It's probably something I would agree with. But the initial reaction on the supply squeeze, this was like not much, right? We were already going into this with oil at a low, 55 to $60 range. Why was that? Well, that tells you where you're at in the kind of the global dollar credit cycle. Growth is soft, energy demand slowing. Um, And then on top of that, you had Saudi around announcement that they were going to pick up supply production. So you don't necessarily have to have full coordination here. You just have to have, tacit understanding between Israel, United States, probably cooperating on a military front on this exercise. Or, maybe not fully, right? Israel's the actual hammer; they are the sword. U.S. is not. So want to be careful about what I say about like using the specific word coordination. They're definitely aware. And then Saudi Arabia, maybe not coordinating, maybe not agreed on plans, et cetera, but they're tangoing, right? They're you don't want to see the spike. What prohibits the site that squeeze in oil markets on geopolitical risk? Well, Saudi Arabia is the slack producer, right? And we just saw them uh, increase the taps.
Because they didn't have a plan ahead of time to. This wasn't a pre-announced thing saying in a month from now we're going to increase supply. This was actually in response to what's going on. Is that correct?
Yeah, and part of this came out of, Trump's visit to the Middle East, probably about 3, 4 weeks ago at this point, where he really reset the American, relationship with the Gulf Coast, with the change of administration. But we're not privy to every single discussion that's had, but like everything we're seeing is kind of, part of strategic execution.
Seeing closer
And
alignment that way. Yep.
yeah, and it's not, there's different ways that this could have gone. It's just, if Iran does this, then we do this. If this, then that. Everybody's, coordinating, operate all of the major players and secondary players, uh, are playing off of each other. But I think the broader point there on the financial tape, you would see this, right? Like the same thing, Battle of Midway. Um, I mean, the way I view this, this was a key linchpin on everything going on between, this global reset between the regional powers, US, EU, Russia, China. This was massive. You got to think who wanted to see this happen, who didn't. Um, and then you look for that in the financial markets on the like the tier one assets that everybody needs to follow. And so the one I would watch, the closest here, what's the next, like who has the ball in their court now, right? I would I would estimate it's probably the EU, the euro, right? This actually took something off the table from them from the geopolitical angle. Uh, and now they have to respond to their own credit, sovereign debt, and economic situation uh, with kind of the check passed to them, right? So I think that's what I would continue to watch, as we put more weeks and months as you're looking for signal. So you look for assets. What put in a top on that overnight between June 12th and June 13th, right? And there's a few things, but notably, the euro uh, put in its top, the pound put in its top, gold actually on Friday rallied into its all-time high for a weekly close, not an all-time intraday high of 3,500 it hit um, back in April. But I would watch the key developments now on FX and in particular, number one, I'd say what's the EU's next step here? How do they react to this development? That that doesn't mean there's still cleanup to be done between the climax and resolution on Iran, right? There's still work there, still, things that could happen. But I would now turn my attention for the remainder of the summer heading into fall to what happens with the EU. So other episodes we've already mentioned prior weeks. EU planned has announced plans for a CBDC rollout in Q3, Q4 2025. They've got the Savings and Investment Union. They're on the hook for funding more military spending to increase their share of NATO budget that they're bringing to the table. And then there's the whole Ukraine situation. So I think this actually puts the ball in EU's court.
It's really interesting because at the same time, we've also got the tariffs question with the EU, right? And it sounded like, as of recent news, there's still some tension between kind of the Trump admin and what the EU wants out of those tariff deals. So just kind of curious to see all of this start to come to a head. And I think we've mentioned on previous episodes as well that early July timeframe. I think that's even when the tariffs for the EU are supposed to go into effect, right? So all of this coming ahead. This is mid June right now. We're 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks out. All coming to a head at the same time is very, very interesting.
We'll talk about like who's got the shortest rope, right? Because it's all, uh, you know, everybody's got a credit problem, right? But it's all a matter of who has to ease or default or debase the currency first. So we'll go over what the U.S. is doing because we have good line of sight and actually some developments this week. So the U.S. has wiggle room. EU has to do other other stuff like more aggressive
Find a way to
type.
kind of push people into doing what they want rather than
Yeah,
using the market forces.